Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Pranzata Podcast. This is episode number 79. This is the return of James Mack. By return, I mean this is the first time ever in the Pranzata Podcast history that I've had the same guest on 2 episodes in a row. I've had returning guests, but this is the first time ever that I've had the same guest in a row. For those of you who didn't catch last week's episode, this James Mack is a stand-up comedian from New York City. He's also many other things, which we found out in the previous episode. He's an ex-cop from Nevada. He's a firearms instructor. He has a lot of awesome degrees in political science, criminal justice, and more. And if I didn't say, he's also a stand-up comedian. So for those of you who want to know more specifically about those topics, I would definitely check out the last episode I had with him. I will include the link below, but we're going to delve into some of the same topics and some different topics this episode. Before we get into it, if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit like and hit subscribe so I can continue to grow this channel. I really enjoy doing this podcast, so it would mean a lot, if you guys could hit the subscribe button. So let's get right into it. My first question for you is, okay, so we're warming up with some comedy questions. Low key to the audience really quick. I don't always like talking about comedy questions because every time I interview comedians, I end up having the same things over and over. But we do sometimes get some comedy questions from the listeners. So first question, and actually this isn't a question I don't think I'm sick of. I'm actually genuinely curious about this. Why? You told me that you started comedy at age 37. Why did you decide to start at age 37?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me back. So.
Oh no, it's a pleasure. We had a cancellation and I was like, shit, I need somebody to do it. Cause I could have done it myself, but it's boring. And then when you reached out, you're like, hey, I'll do it. I was like, absolutely. I loved our last podcast episode. So it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Talking about myself is pretty easy. So no. So why did I start? So literally comedy was something I'd never thought nobody around me would have ever thought I'd get involved in. And like I said, it just kind of was something that fell in my lap. My dad used to say that I'm one of the luckiest people he ever met. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's happened to me with pure happenstance. And I can look throughout my life and find that quite often where, it's just right place, right time, but also a lot of the work that went behind everything. So I have a skill set that beforehand that's good for comedy. Like I'm not afraid of public speaking. Mm-hmm. Being an instructor and talking in front of people and being able to control a crowd, is something that I've had training on, but also something that never bothered me. I did theater, in high school and, public speaking after that, writing. I'm a published poet. I've had my poetry done, stories I've written. So when and also a lot of the stuff that you eventually learn in comedy, like cutting the fat and stuff like that, that's the same thing when you're writing your own speeches, trying to get rid of things that aren't necessary to the point that you're trying to get across. So.
Okay. And then were you a comedy fan before you became a comedian?
Oh, yeah. I've been listening to comedy my whole life. We would travel a lot growing up, and my dad would listen to, a lot of the truck driver comics telling those types of jokes, or like Jerry Clower, or watching Hee Haw, which I know a lot of everybody thinks like it was just, probably like a bunch of country music, but it was also a lot of comedy. Hee Haw was almost like the Southern version of Saturday Night Live. They did skits, they had music, they would have stand-up comics come on and do, stuff. And so I grew up watching it, and, and then as it went on, obviously, Saturday Night Live, I would watch that. I would watch, In Living Color, things like that. And also the comics that went along. I can remember watching Maria Bamford when she first really blew up, when she was just this little lady that with the long blonde hair that would just stand behind the mic and tell her jokes. Like she wasn't animated like she is now.
Wow.
And I can remember that. Dave Attell's Up All Night watching that, obviously the Chappelle Show and stuff like that also. So
no, that's interesting that you said you had the skills necessary for it. And I also think it's funny, like going back to what you said before, that you said you're one of the luckiest people. It's interesting how people have, like, everyone kind of like has, I feel like different people have like different life stories, I guess you could say, like, or like energies that they carry throughout life. And that's funny you say that, because I feel like I'm the polar opposite. Like, I'm one of those people who's had like the shitty luck of the draw, like for a lot of my, like most of my life. But I think what worked for me was like, I've always had a very strong work ethic, I guess you could say. Like, I'm a very determined person. So a lot of my life, I've had to like really push through a lot of shit to get where I want, to be, sort of thing. I guess I shouldn't say that I have never been lucky, because that wouldn't be the case. But yeah, no, that's pretty cool that you, you had that kind of life story so far,
Yeah, no, it's and it's not just in the entertainment industry. I mean, the first time I ever got shot at was in Brazil, and I had a bullet go right under my armpit. Like, it caught the cloth, and I didn't know what it was. I thought, like, I didn't hear it. I just felt a tug, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" My sergeant just snatches me by my collar and rips me to the ground. He's like, "You're getting shot at, dumbass. Quit. Get down."
So you were like this inches close to, yeah. Wow. When stuff like that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That was before body armor. So if it would have hit me, I'd have been done.
When stuff like that happens to you, like you say, you have this luck in your life. Do you ever start to like what's your spiritual beliefs? Do you feel anything spiritual about that, or?
So I kind of grew up a little bit different when it comes to the spiritual. Like I went to church and stuff, but my grandparents on my mom's side come from northern Germany, and so their Catholicism's a little bit mixed in with some of the old Norse stuff. And they believe, and this is kind of the same thing I grew up, and I still believe it to this day, is that, the time that you're going to die is set. So you have no choice in the matter. There's nothing you can do to make that go faster or make that last any longer. So it's there. So regardless of where you're at, what you do, if it's your turn, it's your turn. So you just live your life. So
it looks like you got some close calls then, but it's not your time yet.
Yeah, I've had that. Been multiple IED explosions. I've been within 100 yards of 3 tornadoes. So,
oh Jesus, wow! What was that like, being in 100 yards of 3 tornadoes?
Well, one of them was an F5 that went through Dallas. I was on the freeway. I didn't even know it had hit. 4 tornadoes. I forgot about one. Like I'm listening to the radio and I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, oh my God, like, where's this tornado at? And then I get far enough away to where I can hear where it was. And it was literally just like not far from me. And it was a horrible tornado. Like it's probably one, it was I think it was like the day after Thanksgiving. Yeah. And, it tore up a whole apartment complex, ripped through. Of course, it has to get a trailer park.
Where did you say this was?
This was in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. So I guess in Texas, it's probably a lot more common over there.
Not to that extent. Like an F5 is like huge and horrible. Like that is like what you saw in Twister.
I was going to say, like, when you see something like that close and personal, does it actually look like it does in the movies? Like, does it actually resemble that?
The F5 just looked literally like it was like super dark. So all the lights are out and everything like that. So all you can see is it's like a wall of black. So,
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I was just talking about this with my boyfriend recently because we were driving somewhere and in New Jersey, my phone went off that like Ember Alert or whatever, and it said, or not Ember Alert. That's when someone's missing. I don't know, but the alert that you get on your phone, it was like warning, like tornado warning, and I'm like, there's been tornadoes in New Jersey, like I think it was last year or 2 years ago. Like they had footage of one, like they took pictures of it. It's not, it's getting more common, you know.
Yeah, there was one that happened in Brooklyn a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
but it was a little. I mean, it was an F1, and so my friends were calling me freaking out. I was like, dude, it's an F1. You could have still walked to the store. You're fine.
So like is F5 the hardest it goes?
It goes up to an F6, but like you're good luck making anything out alive if an F6 ever gets anywhere near you. So
wow.
Like an F5 is an act of God, and F6 is an act of multiple gods that you have pissed off. So.
Okay, so next question is from a listener. It was actually from Tim Rager. I think you probably know who Tim Rager is.
Yeah, I know Tim.
So he asked this question a while ago, and I never used it. I think he might have asked it for you, and I just forgot to use it at the last episode. So he wants to know, do you have a ritual that you do before you go on stage as a stand-up comedian?
Yeah, so it's changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to, and I think we talked about this last episode too, is like I used to try and get myself like super hyped up, like jump around.
Right, you did talk about this because we're talking about the PTSD, and then you said you finally realized that was actually counterproductive. It was like your intuition was like, oh, get hyped up, but it actually made you more nervous on stage.
Yeah, because your adrenaline starts running and everything else, and you're getting the heart rate. So now, mainly what I do is I kind of like right before I go up, I usually tend to kind of get off to the side by myself. You know, just look over my set one last time. But mainly the other thing I do is I just try and watch the audience right before I go up, just to see, you know, if there's anything that sticks out. Because I like to try and start my sets off with some kind of quick riff or some observation, because a lot of times it breaks that. It breaks the audience in a good way, in the fact that they're like, oh, wait, like that just happened. So like he's paying attention. Like it's not something that he had written down for, you know, years.
Yeah, no, it's like I've seen comedians do that. They like, I think a big one is like they'll make fun of the location. Like they'll find a way to roast the location they're at, or whatever, like something about the environment they'll kind of like roast or point out. So I've seen comedians do that, and I always think it's pretty effective.
Yeah, and sometimes I will write stuff earlier that day. Like for instance, like we were talking beforehand, like I was in Massachusetts earlier this past week, and I did a show in Springfield, and I just went and literally read their Wikipedia page.
Oh shit! Wow, so you're doing research.
Like, yeah, well, I was sat there eating lunch. Like, hey, is there anything that stands out here that I can kind of have some fun with tonight? You know, and do that. So because it makes it more personable to them, and it, you know, it kind of shows, like the producer was like, wow, like nobody does that. And
no, that totally makes sense. It makes perfect sense actually. Cause like when I do a roast battle, cause I've done a lot of roast battles, I research the person I'm roasting cause I usually don't know them that well. So why not? Like if you're going to do research to roast a person, why not do it for a specific venue or location? That totally makes sense. I never even thought of that. That's so smart.
I've just that was something I just kind of picked up like we were talking about, you know, watching other comics and stuff like that. Like I picked that up from quite a few comics that would do that. They're like, hey, you know, I'm in, you know, Atlanta this week, and you know, they start talking about, you know, the local crackhead or whatever that.
That's right. I have thought of. That's so funny. I've seen that before in like stand-up specials where they'll like. But see, I never thought it was like something that they had researched in advance. I thought it was something like they stayed at a hotel that weekend and saw something and they like kind of wrote it on the spot. But that's a good point. A lot of these people could have wrote that joke well in advance before, you know.
Yeah, and I just try and do it also, like I said, because it makes that connection better between you and your audience. So,
yeah. What's your stage presence like? Because I've actually never seen you perform. Are you more of like an animated, like hyper type of comedian? Or are you kind of like the one I always refer to when I'm like asking comedians this is Nate Bargatze. I feel like Nate Bargatze is like super chill. Like he performs like you're having a conversation with him, like a chill conversation, but he's still fucking hilarious. What would you say you lean more towards, the hyper one or the chill one?
I'm more laid back. Like I can get hyper. Like obviously, if the crowd's really loving everything I'm doing, like as a performer, that's going to hype you up as well. Because now you're like, oh, I get to really play. Like, I did a show in Vernon, New Jersey for a friend of mine at a VFW, and I could have got up there and talked about my dog and how he needs a haircut, and they would have been loving life. But yeah, it's if you get a crowd like that, obviously you're going to be a little bit more energetic, because you're feeding off of their energy. But normally, no, I'm a pretty laid back person. Like,
it's funny. Like I'm visualizing it and I'm having a hard time like picturing you screaming. Like I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure you've screamed in your life or on stage or whatever. But I'm like having a hard time like picturing it for some reason.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't know about with females. I haven't seen too many females. I mean, Jessica Kirsten's the only one I've seen that's like a scream that can do the scream comic thing. Or do it well. I'll put it that way. I've seen her do it. So
I'm trying to think who else. Maybe screaming is a bit of an exaggeration, but there's definitely some like hyper comedians. I would say Whitney Cummings tends to lean on the hyper side.
See, when you say screaming comic, I'm thinking more like Lewis Black, Sam Kinison.
No, I'm Italian, so I exaggerate everything. Oh, okay. I'll be like, he was screaming at me. Like, no, he was just talking sternly to me. Like, you know what I mean? I think that's just like my nature. But I'm thinking more like Bill Burr. Like Bill Burr's not screaming, but he's just really hyper. Yeah. I feel like even Joe, but we're talking females, but I was gonna say Joe Rogan's kind of a screamer and like legit, like he like yells on stage. You know what I mean? Screaming is it's pushing it, but he yells on stage. But no, females, like I would say there's definitely some hyper ones. But as far as like screaming, no, I don't think I've ever seen like a screaming comedian except for Jessica Kirsten, like you said.
Yeah, I was gonna say for hyper ones, I put like Taylor Tomlinson and their Whitney Cummings.
I can't remember Eliza Schlesinger. Yeah, she's pretty hyper, I would say too.
She can be. It depends on which special you watch, because there was one special she was pretty laid back. So
yeah. Okay, so let's move on. What were you saying?
That was the point of that special, though. Was like. But yeah, for me, I'm pretty laid back. I like to kind of just have a conversation. There are some stuff that I get a little bit louder in, but that's part of the joke. So
okay, so let's move on from the comedy questions. Okay, I put this question in there. I don't know how we didn't talk about this last time. I don't know how we dodged this, or maybe I asked you, but we just kind of like got off track. You said you did rodeo. I definitely need to know about this. I've never in my life met a person who did rodeo. What was that like? And like, can you explain what rodeo is for people who might not know what that is?
Sure. Yeah. So rodeo is a series of events based on Western ranch hand work. So it's a competition. So initially it started as, like on ranches, they would be like, oh, who's our best roper? Who's the, best horse rider, who has the fastest horse, that kind of stuff. And eventually it just turned into a sport. And so I started out, you have multiple events. You have stuff, team roping, calf roping, tie down roping, breakaway roping. You have bull riding, bareback, saddle bronc. Those last two are on horses. Like I said, bull riding. That's the only one that doesn't relate to some type of ranch work. It's literally, let's see whose balls are bigger. Yeah. And then you have barrel racing, which is mostly females, but it's not strictly female. I do know guys that have done that professionally. Yeah, that's the majority of the ones you see. I started out as a calf roper and a team roper. So a calf roper is literally they let the calf go. You have and then you chase after the calf. You have to rope the calf, get off of your horse, flip the calf over, and tie three of their feet together, and then put your hands up saying that you're done. And then the calf has to stay tied up for 5 seconds. And then you hop back off, let them go. And
that's insane. I never knew. And I wonder what the history of this is. Like, I wonder how long this has been going on. Do you know anything about that? Like the history of rodeo?
I mean, obviously it's not 100% tracked down just because, it started out as just ranch competitions.
Yeah.
For fun for the cowboys. But as far as professional rodeo, I'd have to go look. But I know PRCA, which is the biggest professional organization for rodeo cowboys, has been around since at least the 60s.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have some that go even further back. And there's a lot of stuff like when it comes to bull riding, which is the one that gets the most TV coverage. Because,
I've seen that a lot. Yeah,
it's the most dangerous, and I can attest to that. So I did bull riding as well. After a while, I rode bulls while I was in the military. All the branches have a rodeo team, and I even got to ride for PBR twice, which is the Professional Bull Riders Association. Did not do well. Matter of fact, I got a concussion out of one of my rides. So, on a bull called Tilt-A-Whirl. So I slid back right by his ass, and he lived up to his name and just slung me into the fence.
I guess that's another one of your lucky situations that didn't kill you.
It didn't feel real great for about a couple of weeks, but yeah, and my boss in the military was not happy about that. So. But it is what it is.
It's crazy. You really have done it all. Like, I'm thinking back to our last podcast that you worked for ESPN, you're a comedian. It's just like insane. Your life stories are wild. Like I said, I've never met anyone who's done rodeo. Did, in hindsight from doing that, like, was it worth it to you to do rodeo? Or did you ever feel like, okay, that wasn't worth putting myself in that type of danger,
I don't know if bull riding was the smartest idea. But doing rodeo never bothered me. Like I said, I started out as a roper, so that's a very skilled set. That's something where you control more of what's going on than anybody else does. So, but bull riding, it's a legit sport. Like the bulls that make it to the highest level, and they're bred for that. Like that's what they get, bred for. And the bulls at the highest level are athletes just as much as the cowboys are. And like you go and watch it live, and you can see the bulls. And they're not, obviously they're not going to be solving like quantum mechanics, but the bulls know what's going on. They know what they have to do to get fed later that night. So
yeah. Isn't there something else with bulls too? I remember I used to see in like the cartoons, they would hold that red flag and they would go running. What was that?
Oh, that's bullfighting. That's Spanish bullfighting.
What is, I can't remember what exactly that is, but I kind of like vaguely remember seeing like cartoons of that. What is that?
From what I've read on that, I haven't got to see it in person. So basically they release a bull, and the bullfighter has their cape. And the whole idea is just kind of to put on a show before they kill the bull. So, but a lot of people misinterpret that the color red is what gets the bull. It's actually just movement. Bulls are colorblind. So
they might have just stuck with red because it's like stands out as a showpiece as well. If it doesn't stand out to the bull, it might just stand out for the audience or like the showmanship of it all. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating, but.
Well, it also goes with their outfit. So it's a cape that they actually wear that they pull off. So red makes sense. It usually
wow,
does both things.
That's interesting. And one more question about the rodeo. Were there ever people who kind of criticized it like, oh, this is unfair to the animals? You guys are playing tricks, playing games with them just for your enjoyment. Was there any like criticism in that kind of way from the public?
Always. The Madison Square Garden hosted the one of the opening events for professional bull riding for PBR. And there were protesters out there, but a lot of the stuff that they were putting out has been corrected and fixed in rodeo. Like obviously, a lot of stuff from back in the day that was done, what was cruel to animals, using shock or cattle prods, things like that to kind of force the animal to do things that maybe it wasn't ready to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of that stuff's gone away. And it's been made a lot safer for not only the riders, but the animals as well. Because I mean, you have some of these animals, you have a prize winning bull that goes through an entire season and nobody rides that bull, the contractor or the owner of that bull can get millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So they don't want to see that animal get hurt either. So
yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot to that. And there's like that could branch out to different things too, like even horseback riding. Like people could be like, oh, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure that question has been asked there too, Okay. So my next question for you is, okay, you said you have 3 college degrees, one in criminal justice. And I didn't ask you about this last time, I don't think, but you have one in criminal justice, one in political science, and one in business. I too have a few different college degrees. And I've talked about this with some other people on podcasts. So I'm curious to know what your take is on this. After getting multiple college degrees, do you think college was worth it to you? Like financially, I mean, if you had to spend money on it or just the whole spending the years in it, was it worth it for you?
I think any education is worth it for people, as long as it's something that you're interested in and that will better your life in some way, shape, or form. I'm all for the more education you have, the better you are. It doesn't necessarily have to come from a formal university or a college or something like that. I still read a lot to constantly learn stuff.
Yeah.
And I think the more that you learn, the better off you are. As long as you allow that the education and the knowledge that you've gained to actually affect how you live your life. And I can't say I'm 100% on that. I mean, how many times have we been told, fast food is not good for you, but yet you still wander off to, whatever burger joint.
What's your guilty pleasure burger joint or fast food joint?
Oh, Wendy's. Up here, obviously, if I was back home, it'd be Whataburger. But yeah. Wait, what was that for?
What was what for?
I said Whataburger, and you went.
Oh no, I was just I was just thinking about like what my burger would be, and I'm like thinking White Castle, and I was just like thinking about it for some reason. I'm not sure why I made that face. I was definitely not making the face at your burger, but I'm a big like White Castle fan for some reason.
It took me a while to get used to White Castle because we have Crystals down south, which is almost the same. It's a little different, but it's basically based off of the same idea, the little burgers and fries and stuff. So, but yeah, I've tried White Castle. They're not too bad. It just takes too many of them to make a meal. So,
okay. So going back to the question about the college stuff, I guess the reason I brought it up is because I had a discussion with like somebody else about the financial aspect of things. And as far my opinion on that, for those who didn't see this episode, I'm referring to, I'm all for what you said about the education aspect of things. The financial end of things, though, for me, is probably my biggest regret about college because I took out student loans. I don't know if you had to take out loans to go to college. See, I took out the loans, and now what's that? All paid for it. If college is all paid for, fuck yeah, go for that. Why wouldn't you?
Y'all paid for that.
In my case, you know, like I said, I've always been like a very determined person. And at that point in my life, I thought that college would have been the best track for me. So I took out the loans myself and I went there. Now, while I did gain a good education from college, now the amount of work that I have to do to pay off those loans are actually taking away from my ability to learn new things, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like there's a lot more things I want to learn and I want to do in my life. And I have to do things that I don't want to do to make money in order to pay those loans off. So it's like in the long term, I don't think college helped me. If I could go back, I would have done one of two things. I would have paid out of pocket, like, and just done the slow ride and gone for like 20 years and like graduated when I was like 40 and just did like 2 classes at a time. I would have done that. Or rather than going to college, I would have just found like teachers who specialized in these subjects and just took courses from them as opposed to the whole college degree. So I'm like mixed about that. I agree with you about the education thing, but if you have to pay for it yourself, in my opinion, it's not worth it. I mean, depending on what you want to do, if you want to be a doctor, it's going to pay itself back. But I mean, like I studied music. Like I don't think I needed to take out $80,000 of debt to be a musician. I probably could have just found a really good music professor or a couple really good music professors and avoided all the math and English classes and stuff that I wasted money on, you know?
But one of the things, and you kind of hit a really good point, you know, is it worth it to do it all at once? It maybe is a question I would say. So the reason I put it that way is, for instance, like I have an aunt who retired as a nurse practitioner, and what she did to make sure that she really wanted to do, like that wasn't her ultimate goal. She just wanted to be a registered nurse at the beginning. But what she did was she was like, oh, I'll go get my CNA license and kind of test the waters a little bit and see if that's what I want to do. I think that's one of the things that's kind of been pushed onto, I'd probably say starting with my generation, from you know, above. My dad wasn't like this, luckily, but you could tell it in school, like everything's leading towards college, towards university. And nobody's really talking about like, hey, is this degree really going to get you into the job that you think you want? And think you want is the preferred, is the part of that sentence that I always tell people, because I mean, I have so many friends that have degree, you know, MBAs, people I went to class with for my master's in business, that they're not even in business anymore. They hated it because they literally did nothing but go to college. They went from freshman year through their MBA and never started using any of that business stuff. And
also, it's hard to know who you are when you're 18. You know what I mean? Like when you're right. Mm-hmm. That is like kind of the message in the high schools. Like they kind of are just like, get the good, what is it? The SAT, get a good SAT score, get into college. And there's really no career planning for your future. There's really no conversations like you're saying, like, hey, have you ever thought of trying an internship? Have you ever thought about taking a break and tried working different places to see what field you even like before you commit to a degree? So I totally agree with you. Like in high schools, there definitely should be more like actual career planning about this stuff. Like, and like honest conversations from people who have been to college. Like, hey, I went to college. I chose the wrong degree. Now I'm in student loan debt. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think people should be more like, you know, like people should be more aware of that stuff before they're making these decisions, because 18 years old, you're just going to kind of, I mean, unless you're a very rebellious 18-year-old, but I would say a lot of 18-year-olds just kind of go with the flow of what they're being told to do by society, you know?
Yeah. And even if you're rebellious, you know, eventually you still got to figure out some way to pay for stuff. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, like even when I, you know, got out of the Army, you know, I hit quite a few different jobs in there because I like the people. I would find a job that I really liked the people I worked with, but you know, I was like, I can't see myself doing this for, you know, 20 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, same thing. Like when we talked about ESPN, like they paid really well, they covered everything, but you're on the road 6 days out of 7 in a week, and there are no holidays. Like there's always sports going on.
I was literally just thinking about, so I remember asking you that question. I'm like, that sounds like an awesome job. Why the hell would you ever quit that? And you talked about the aspect of like, it's awesome, but it's so tiring. I was literally just thinking about this as a musician. So I'm a musician who gigs, I do performances to make money. It's kind of like a thing as musicians. It's really hard to make money as a musician if you're not selling arenas like Ariana Grande or something, and you're just kind of like a low key musician. If you're writing original music, it's really difficult to make money unless you're like very big. So a lot of musicians who aren't in that position will do like weddings and stuff like that because they pay really well. However, they're fucking exhausting. Like cause like what a lot of people don't realize, like for musicians that do that stuff is a lot of the times not every time, sometimes venues are good at like setting up sound equipment and stuff like that. But a lot of the times these musicians pack their gear, pack their sound equipment, do all of that, have to set it up themselves. And then on top of that, after doing this physical workout that, like, again, somebody like, Madonna or Ariana Grande would have a team of people doing that for, as a female, there's also the makeup end of things too. Like, I live with my boyfriend. He's a drummer. When he has to go to a gig, he just throws on a thing and goes. He doesn't do very much. Somebody like fucking Lady Gaga has a hairstylist and a makeup artist. So I have to do my makeup, do my hair, find a dress, pack my gear, put the gear, set the gear up. And then it's like all that for like $300. It's like, it's really not that much worth it. And like a lot of people are like, oh, that must be living the dream. And I'm like, actually, not really. I don't think I would want to do that for my life. Like when I wanted to be a musician, I didn't want to be that, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to write my own music and have like my own fan base and stuff like that. So I have some friends who take the route or like have the goal of like becoming a gigging musician and doing that professionally. I don't want to do that because I think that it's like a way to just burn yourself out. I want to try to do it online because that's the thing. Like if you're not like, like one of those famous pop stars, there are people who build a fan base online. So that's like one of the reasons why I even do this podcast, because I kind of split it up with the music stuff and the podcast. Like I kind of like just try to grow everything online. I think, in my opinion, that's the smartest way to do it now. I mean, that's just my honest opinion, Well,
I think definitely now, whether any kind of art now, if you're not doing some kind of digital presence, I think is what it's called in marketing. Mm-hmm. You're completely missing out because now you literally have the world at your availability. Whether it's music, comedy, painting, drawing, any kind of digital format, any of that, or any of the other arts. I don't want people thinking I left somebody out. So, but I think if you're not doing that at this point, you're selling yourself short.
Yeah. So. And like, it's amazing. Like the kind of musicians I've seen online, that are actually have like a huge fan base and they're probably making money off their YouTube videos. Like some of them are just kind of like, one is this young girl, like she's not all dolled up and fancy. She's just kind of like a plain, young girl. And she doesn't have like a fancy background or anything. She kind of has just like a very plain living room and she's just playing piano, ragtime piano. And she's got like thousands of listeners. And I'm just like, that's incredible. You don't have to be this like grand pop star to sell your music. And, so I write original music and I'm working on recording it this year. And I really want to try to get it out there on the internet. Cause like, I don't see myself being like a wedding musician and like breaking my back for the rest of my life. Like I could do it for a few years. Like it's fun for a few years, but definitely not for like a full-time career. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, definitely. I can't remember the lady's name now, but the lady who came out with the I Know Victoria's Secret, like that's it was a pop song that came out, I think, last year. But that's essentially like the whole digital platform. That's how that song blew up.
That song's great, by the way. It's like a great song. You know what I mean? Like I heard it because I also teach piano lessons, like and voice lessons and stuff to kids. And I went to some like one of my students' recitals, and there was like a bunch of other girls there singing, and one of the girls was singing that for her recital piece. And I was like, I never heard that. That was like a pretty clever song. So that's good to know that just came off of somebody's YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, go look at Billie Eilish, Justin Bieber, like all of them, like they're all digital superstars. That's how they started. So
yeah, so that's definitely the route I want to take, is trying to build an online presence so that I don't, I'm going to be stuck doing the wedding music for a few years because like I got to make money doing this somehow, but I definitely don't want it to be a full time like rest of my life. You know what I mean?
yeah, no, definitely.
Okay, so next question. Let's see. College. We already talked about that. Okay, criminal justice reform. We did talk about the thin blue line last time, but I was curious, like, if you could expand a little bit, because you said in your bio that you were passionate about criminal justice reform. Is there, besides the thin blue line stuff that we talked about, is there any other avenues of this that you're passionate about? And how did you become passionate about this?
So the first thing I got to say that kind of for the criminal justice reform, how I'll start with how I became passionate about it. Part of it was just being in the criminal justice system and kind of seeing how it really works. A lot of people don't get to see that. They like there's even a problem now on juries where so many people are watching, Blue Bloods, NYPD, like all of that. That now they think that's the reality. They think DNA evidence comes back in 24 hours. That you're going to solve a crime in 72 hours like that. And that's not the truth. For the most part, I mean, those are very rare that happens when you start talking about serious cases. So that's the first thing that I was kind of like, well, that's not right. But the being a part of the system, you also start seeing other things. And the first thing I try to explain to people is it's, and I understand people are going to argue about this, but this is from my interview looking out, is that the criminal justice system is less against your race and more against you being poor. If you don't have money, you're going to get screwed quick. And I've seen that regardless of race, sex, culture, creed. Obviously, you do have some instances in there where it's obvious that you have a judge that sentences person A to 2 years confinement, and then person B has done the exact same thing, exact same amounts, and they're getting probation. So you do have some instances like that, but for the most part, what I saw when I looked at the data, and you really start getting into the data, looking at individual cases, you start noticing money is the number one difference. And that I'm not sure 100% how to fix that, but that there's got to be something. You can't constantly have the oligarchy that we have going on. Basically, it's like if you have the money, you can get away with whatever you want. And I love the best comedy version, but it's dead on, is Dave Chappelle, the Plead the Fifth skit. He's like, if drug dealers got treated like Wall Street, bankers and Wall Street bankers got treated like your drug dealer, the major differences you would see. And if you haven't seen it, I won't go completely into it, but go check it out. And it's dead on.
Which special is this? Like, in case I want to check it out.
No, this was one of his skits from the Dave Chappelle show.
Oh, never mind. I misheard you. So it's not for one of his specials. Okay, gotcha.
But he plays that out. And that's one of the biggest ones that I think we have to find some way to start making it even across the board. But the other aspect to it is we have to, that I'd really like to see is, even if first of all, we got to get rid of private prisons. You have 4 profit prisons out there, which is bullcrap. That was never supposed to be anything that we were supposed to do. Because states will sign contracts with these prisons saying, hey, you have to keep us stocked at a certain level of prisoners. Well, what do you think happens when your state starts getting cleaned up? They're starting to get their therapy. They're starting to get all these resources. And then all of a sudden you have this for-profit prison going, hey, we're falling short. We don't have people. like a governor's not going to say, okay, well, we'll pay that $10 million fine, every year because we didn't meet our quota. They're going to turn around and be like, hey, okay, start putting the poor people in jail again. So that stuff's got to go. The next one is we have to find some way to make our jails into not necessarily just a punishment house. Like you have to have true reform. You have to start giving these people, whether it's therapy or the health, the doctors they need. But also the other thing, and this is something that it's always irritated me, is you have people that will go to prison for a crime. Like say, for instance, if it was trafficking drugs, well, the state will find those people and take off the $1.25 a day they make working in prison. And then sometimes they'll extend their prison sentence until they pay off that fine. Well, if you're only making $1.25 a day working 8 hours a day, how long do you think that's going to take you to pay that off?
Yeah.
So I think New York City had a good idea that didn't go all the way through with, hey, if it is a nonviolent, and so New York was like, hey, we're going to go to bailless bonds. So your money isn't involved, which I think that's a good idea. But they kind of messed it up when they were like, oh, you shot somebody? Yeah, 72 hours. You can go back out. Well, they're going to shoot somebody again. I think if it's a violent crime, it should be no bail. Sorry. Regardless of who you are. Like, I don't care if you're Donald Trump or if you're Don Smith Jr. from 42nd Street. If it's a violent crime that that the DA's office thinks that they have enough evidence to prosecute you on under probable cause, then guess what? You don't get bail. You're staying in jail until we can figure this out.
Yeah, that I agree with that. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's any violent crime. So whether it's from assault all the way up to obviously homicide, things like that.
Now here's a question. You were asking about, not asking about, you were saying that a lot of it is because of money, why this stuff happens.
Yeah.
If a criminal has a family or they have a lot of money, can they have their sentence shortened because they have enough money to bail themselves out?
Well, it's not their sentence gets shortened. What happens is when they appear in front of the judge for their initial appearance, the judge will be like, oh, your bail is set at, we'll say $50,000, just as an example. Well, you only, to bond out is what it's called, to get out of jail, you only have to pay 10% of that. So if I have money and I only have to pay $5,000 to get out, so let's say both of us go up for, we'll say, simple assault. We both did the exact same thing. We're in a bar drinking. You hit a girl, I hit a guy. So we both get arrested. But I have monetary funds available to me. You don't. So now we both go in front of the judge. He both says $50,000 bail, which 10% is $5,000. So it's like, okay, I put the $5,000 down. Now, what do you have to do in order to get that $5,000? You have to call all your family. They have to put what money, and I'm just saying this for instance. I'm not trying to put anybody down, whatever. And I can use a fictitious person if you want. That's fine. But let's say, I come from a wealthy family. You don't. You come from, blue collar and everything. So now what happens is in order to get you out of jail, everybody has to take this extra money that they probably don't have to begin with and now put it all together to get you out of jail, or you stay in jail until your hearing, which could be 2 years.
Wow.
And that's part of the reason why New York City went to a bailless system, was because they were like, well, wait a second. Like, it's kind of like, the other way I try to explain it is a speeding ticket is essentially me paying a price to be able to drive that fast.
I never thought of it, but that's a good way to put it. It's like, hey, well, but I mean, I don't know how the law is, but don't you, if you have a certain amount of speeding tickets, doesn't that eventually pay off though? I mean, doesn't that eventually add up to where like, hey, you've had X amount of speeding tickets within a certain time, you're going to jail? Is that a thing or is that not a thing?
It can, but usually what happens is the fines just keep increasing.
So again, money. If they can say, hey, you caused a crime or you committed a crime by speeding, but we'll take your money and you'll be good to go.
Yeah. So now, okay, well, now I know what it's going to cost me to go 85 miles per hour on the speedway.
And you're right that like when you were saying about when people are already poor, it's like almost impossible to get out of that position. That's not even like, I don't know. I'm learning a lot from you about this. I didn't even really know much about this, about the jail system and everything like that. But I do that because I'm somebody who's struggled with finances with this student loan debt and everything like that. I do know that a lot of things are set up that way. Like even just like when you're struggling with your bills, it feels like every company makes it worse for you. Like, so for example, if you go into, if you don't have any money in your bank and you go into withdraw, well, then they fine you and then they fine you a week later. And then it's like, okay, well, now I'm fined $400. I already had zero to begin with. If I had zero to begin with, clearly I'm not in a place where like I can just come up with $400. $5 would have been good. You know what I mean? So there's that. And then there's just like other things. Like if you have low credit score, they're like, okay, we'll give you a lease, but we're going to double the price. So it's like you can't lease a car or buy a car, finance a car for a low price if you have a bad credit score. Like it's just like everything. If you're in that position, they know you're desperate and they'll do whatever they can to keep you there so that you can keep spending money. You know what I mean? Yep. Or like the Venmo instant transfer is another one too. Like,
oh yeah.
On Venmo, if you need your money right away and you're somebody who like desperately needs it right away, they charge you like, I don't know how much percentage, but like it's usually like 50 cents to like a couple dollars depending, on how big it is. But I'm like, that's another one. It's like some people, if they need the money right then, like why should it cost money to get it? You know what I mean? I don't know.
My understanding of that is essentially you're paying a fee or a tax, so to speak, to be put at the front of the line. So.
Okay. Well, I guess I guess that's not so bad. That makes sense. But like the thing with the banks, like when you're getting like all those fees for already withdrawing, it's just like too much,
The one that always confused me, and I had this happen. This is why I'm bringing this up is with banks. Is say for instance, you have a loan for a vehicle, and when you first got it, you didn't have great credit, and you're paying. We'll say $400 and you had like a 12% APR on that. And now, you've got your credits taken care of or it's moving up. I'll put it that way. You're starting to fix yourself and you're like, man, if I can lower this car payment, it would really help me. Like, refinancing is never a good idea because you're essentially extending your loan and you're going to pay way more than the vehicle's worth. But sometimes it will help. Like if you can reduce that by even $100 a month, you're like, oh, cool. Now I can, it's a buffer zone for me. And I remember, I think I was probably 22, 23. I know I was still in the Army. And I remember I called my bank up and I was like, hey, I want to refinance for my vehicle and everything. And I was like, to make it lower. And I'd already gone through their little online system to figure out like what I would be paying a month and everything. And they were like, oh, we can't when they ran my credit and everything, they were like, oh, we can't refinance. I said, I don't understand. Like I've been paying, we'll say $400. Like I'm willing to extend the loan and just pay a little less every month. I was like, that makes no sense. If I'm already paying $400, I can cover $225 or $300. Yeah. They're like, yeah, but we can't do that because your credit score. I was like, so I can't. So I have a better credit score, but you're not willing to reduce the payment and extend the contract.
Because they're saying, oh, if your credit score is good, you could afford it, is like what they're basically saying.
Yeah. Well, that, and then also there's the whole FDIC and all the regulations and stuff. And I was like, I don't understand. Like I qualified for this with a worse credit score. Like, how is it not possible? And
it's ridiculous.
Yeah. That's some other stuff that you kind of start getting into and you're just shaking your head. Like, this makes no sense. Like, extend it out and give me a less payment so I can catch up on everything else.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate, but it seems like there's a lot of corruption in like all the fields, like medical, psychology. It seems like there's so many fields that have like corruption when it comes to money. And I can understand. I was talking about this with somebody the other day. Like I try to stay positive, but at the same time, I also could understand why some people in the United States could be depressed and like have a negative view of society. When you start to really, I get in those, I'll be honest, sometimes I get into states of mind where I'm just like, this is all terrible. And I try not to get there. And I, unfortunately, I've had like depressions in my life where I have felt that way. And I'm like kind of coming out of one right now. But there's been moments in my life where I'm just like, there's so much corruption in the world that I don't even know how this is bearable. You know what I mean? So I don't blame people for getting to that place, especially if they're on the negative end of things, you know what I mean? Or even like, that's another thing too. It's like, I don't even understand how people could partake in the people who are on the positive end of things in the sense that, not that they're not poor, but in the sense that they're ripping people off. Like you seem like a good person, like, because it seems like you're someone who's been in positions where you could have been that asshole. Like you could have followed, like when we talked about the thin blue line stuff, for example, you could have followed the footsteps of other policemen. But you kind of were like, wait a second, like, I see what's going on here. I don't like it. Like that, in my opinion, I think you're a very good person because there's so many people out there that just go with the flow on the positive end of things and become part of that corruption. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. And some of it's also, you know, and I don't like using the word morals because then it sounds like you're like trained, for lack of a better expression. But I don't know, like that was kind of how I grew up is, you know, you try and help people when you can. And also, I mean, my dad was special forces. Their motto is Libre de Oppresso, to free the oppressed. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, even though I was never special forces, by no shadow of a doubt, never even went to selection for it, never tried out, wasn't my thing. I know enough about them to know that it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I still believe in that motto. And I think you need, I've always told people if I ever see racism, sexism, blah, 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 whatever it is in front of me, something I can definitely point at to that specific instance, I won't tolerate it. And I've proven that sometimes to my detriment, unfortunately, in the comedy community or people around me. I've told comics that thought I was their friend, they start using racial slurs. And I'm like, get the fuck away from me. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And, or guys that are like, oh, there's no female comics. And you can go and search it. Like I've stood up for them. And I'm like, no, there's tons of them. It's just, you're not smart enough to get their fucking jokes. So, or in some of it, I could kind of understand. It also depends on what level of comedy you looked at. Obviously, if you're going into only open mics, nothing against open micers. We all started that way, but let's be honest, the jokes aren't developed yet.
Yeah.
And if you're going to that or the Brenger shows, then yeah, you're,
yeah, it's not fair to judge female comedians off of open mics because it's like, I mean, I remember we were talking about this because you mentioned it. You made a comment on my my one clip where I said there weren't that many. You said in New York City it actually is a lot more, but I know in New Jersey, like where I was from. In New Jersey, like Central Jersey, I would even sometimes go to North Jersey, closer to New York City, but still North Jersey. There would be like, if there was a room full of 20 comics at an open mic, there would be about 4 females. So from my perspective, there weren't that many females. But like going back to what we were saying, it wouldn't be fair for a male comic to judge a female comic at that because there's only 4. Like, you know what I mean? Like out of the 20 the 20 male comedians that were also there, not that many of them are that funny either because they're all open micers. Like there may be like 1 or 2 really funny ones there because they're either professionals that are just practicing at open mic or they're open micers that have been doing it for a while. So they're getting out of there. But there's so few females at those that it's unfair to judge them, in my opinion,
Yeah. And the other thing, and this was more of what I meant by that comic, because I can't remember. It was a Philly comic that you had on. That's all I remember. Rough.
Oh, no. So this was a New York City comedian. So this was a girl from New York City. We were doing a virtual podcast. And we were, was it? Now I don't remember.
I thought she was out of Philly. I'm sorry.
I could be thinking of a different person now.
But But no,
it was. Yeah. No, I'm mixing up two people in my head because I couldn't remember which clip it was from. But you're right, it was a Philly comedian. Yeah, I know who it is.
And I completely understand. One of the things that I know for a fact, like for instance, and I made this very public. So I run an open mic every Saturday in New York City, and I made it very clear that I wanted a female co-host. So that way, female comics or anybody, they come in, there's representation from different sides, and so they don't feel uncomfortable coming in there. Yeah. I pull up female. I don't say hired because it's not a job, but I guess I accepted two female co-hosts to come and help host that mic. But one of the things I want to clarify is I wasn't necessarily talking about like other male comics or male comics talking about females aren't funny. I'm talking about regular people. Because you still see it. Like I did a show not that long ago, and I felt bad because I was gonna I also try and do that with my bookings. Like if I'm gonna go do a private show, I don't want another guy. Like they're gonna, not that I do anything the other guy is going to do, but hey, let's get something completely different. And I initially for this private show was like, hey, I'm going to bring this female with me. And the guy's like, absolutely not. He's like, it's only going to be guys.
Wow. That's
and I was
insane.
Like, okay, I'll do it myself. So,
and it's also smart to have different, gendered comedians up there as well, because if you have non-comedian audience, if you just have, I hate to say regular people because it's like separating, but you know what I mean? Yeah. If you have audience members that are not comedians, they're probably going to be a mix of like male and female audience members. So it makes more sense to have some female comedians up there to connect with the female audience. Not that you can't say jokes that connect with everybody, but sometimes you're just going to get female comedians that specifically connect with female listeners. And then sometimes you're going to get males that connect with male listeners. So it makes more sense to kind of have like a diverse roster of comedians up there,
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's and you do have some places like I did make a comment, about the New York City scene. It's become, at least from everything I've seen, obviously you don't see every show's flyer, you don't see everything like that. But when I'm looking at the New York comedy scene post and Facebook on Instagram, there's now become a very prevalent surge. Where now it's, we're going to do like weekly shows of only females. Like there's not going to be a guy on the lineup at all.
I actually got signed up to do one in Philly in a couple weeks by that same girl you're talking about. She reached out to me and she's like, hey, I'm doing an all female comedy show. Do you want to be on it? I'm like, sure. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I've never done that before, but it'll be interesting to like meet and connect with other female comedians. Cause I don't meet them that much. Like that's another thing too. Cause like you said, in New York City, it's more common. In New Jersey, it's really not. So like, I don't really get to meet them that much,
Well, I don't think Jersey has enough of a scene to do that.
Yeah. So Philly, I sometimes go over to Philly. I live in South Jersey, which is super close to Philly. I sometimes pop over to Philly, and it is better than Jersey as far as like female to male ratio, but it's still, I would say, mostly male. Like I did a couple open mics and it was like pretty similar, maybe a little bit more female, but not much more, but yeah. New York, I've done open mics in New York when I was like living in central Jersey. I would sometimes drive to New York because it was like an hour away. It wasn't that bad. I would definitely see a lot more females there for sure.
Oh yeah. But the only thing that kind of worries me is like, I'll see, like I'm talking about, there are weekly shows and every week that one show, or not just that one show, but these multitude of shows are only female. They're only LGBTQ. They're only this. And I'm like, guys, that's really not a good thing to really be doing.
Oh, like, you mean like as hard. Like a regular thing? Yeah.
Yeah. Like obviously, that there's good sides to it. My concern is you're sectioning off the comics. 2, you're sectioning off your crowd.
Yeah.
And also you're not getting honest feedback about your jokes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I didn't even think of it that way.
Sure.
I didn't realize I thought you meant like just once in a while, like those types of shows. Like you didn't realize you meant it was like a club that did it, weekly.
Oh yeah. And the same thing, like, I've seen producers like, they'll put them on every now and again. Like I know, during the quarantine, I did a Mother's Day show. It was all virtual, but we got mothers from all over the world and did like a 3-hour comedy show. Just let it roll of nothing but moms. And we're like, yeah, for stuff like that, or like Veterans Day. Hey, all veterans comics, or special occasions. Yeah, that's cool. But I think if you're doing it constantly, and I see some comics, they've kind of made that their niche, whatever, however you say that word. I can't think right now.
I think it's niche. Well, actually, I think people say it both ways. I say niche. Yeah. I say niche, but I've heard people say niche. I've heard people say both, so I don't know.
I think
drop in the comment, listeners. How do you pronounce it? Phonetically spell it in the comment section, because I have no idea.
Yeah, I've heard it said both ways, and I'm always like, well, but now I'm starting to see some of my friends that are comics that's now all they do. They'll only do those specialty shows. And I was like,
yeah, see, like the female one that I got invited to do, it's for a Mother's Day thing. So I guess it's like to celebrate motherhood or whatever. It's like all female comedians. But I agree with you on that one. If it was like a regular thing where it was all they did. Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of worries me, because and obviously everybody, hey, it's your career, do what you want. But my concern is like you're starting to kind of put yourself in an echo chamber, and your comedy may not start revealing.
Yeah, because if you want to headline one day somewhere, how many all female clubs are there going to be in the world? You know what I mean? So you're kind of limiting yourself to being able, like let's say one of those women in those groups is really, successful, like becomes very successful, and now she wants to start going to other clubs, and then she starts bombing because she doesn't know what the general population thinks of her jokes. That's a really good point, actually.
Yeah, and it's not just for females. Also, like I said, it could be culture, race, whatever, where you have comics that say they're an immigrant, and we'll just say, for instance, like say they're from England, and now for whatever reason they're only doing shows that are only audienced with people from England. So we'll just say I
saw one comedian. I didn't listen to him, but I saw it once. He did a show for only drummers. He was a drummer who did a special about drumming, and I mean, I guess you could be a non-drummer and come to the show, but you wouldn't get any of the jokes. Like, it was like a comedy special just for drummers. And it's like, and I knew another guy, like there was that guy, and I actually knew personally another guy who was a stand-up comedian, but also a wine sommelier, or whatever. Do you know what a wine sommelier? He only did jokes about wine, and he would go to corporate events. So, I mean, I guess there is somewhat of a perk to that, because you can find paid jobs for these special events, but you're never, if that's all you want to do, that's all you're going to get, because you're probably never going to become Bill Burr, with that. You know what I mean?
Well, but the other thing I've noticed, like I said, is with the like I was using the example, say your only thing you're doing is people from England. That's all you're doing is all the people that live in New York City that are originally from England. That's cool and all, but now what happens when I put you in front of a regular club audience that doesn't have only people from England, or maybe even worse, you have people from, say, India in that audience that aren't fans of people from England.
Yeah, no, yeah. So they're just kind of doing themselves a disservice in that case.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I've seen people build careers. I mean, go look, there's tons of examples out there of people, but that's few and far between. So, I
mean, I guess to play devil's advocate, I do agree with you, but I just thought of this point, is that is something that all comedians deal with regardless. Let's say, you're from New Jersey and you're just used to performing in New Jersey. I've actually experienced this myself. Yeah. When I did performances in New Jersey, I finally got myself to a place where I was like, people here like this. I then did an open mic in Philly and found out their style was just so different there, and they hated me. So in a way, all comedians have to deal with this, but I guess the difference would be that those comedians actually want to learn how to develop in other places, as if the ones that are only doing them for England, they might just stay that way, you know?
Yeah. And like I said, obviously everybody has their own career. It's just something that I kind of started noticing becoming more of an issue, or more prevalent, I should say, not necessarily more of an issue, because it's not a problem for me. I could give a shit. But
it's not what you would do. It's like not the route you would take. You wouldn't advise. It wouldn't be a good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, obviously, you know, I have my own little niche that I can get into, because I know for a fact I have bookers that will only reach out to me when they have a VFW, an American Legion, or a veterans fundraiser.
Gotcha.
And those, I'm like, okay, I understand you're looking for somebody to do that, but I also make sure that I'm getting paid for that. So, so it's one of those, like, sure, that's cool. But you know, that's not the only thing I want to be known for. I don't want to only be known as like a veteran, you know, the veteran comic. So,
right. There are people out there like that they naturally fall into like a thing, and then that's their thing. And I have heard people like that complain about it. They're like, shit, I didn't know I'd become this thing. I don't want to be just this thing.
Yeah. Fluffy talks about it. One of his specials, I can't remember, is that when he first started, he was known as the Mexican comic.
Oh, wow.
And then he was the fat Mexican comic. And then eventually he had to get out of the Southwest and start doing like Connecticut and stuff like that. He said, and finally they just started introducing me as a comedian.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the podcast here. So I have just two more questions for you.
Sure.
These ones are more philosophical questions. This one is, if you can, I don't know why, I actually have like a little notebook of podcast ideas that I have like throughout the day. And I'm like, ooh, this is an interesting question. I'll ask this to somebody. So I literally pulled this out of a notebook that I wrote from like a while ago. It's, if you can guarantee the world was ending like in a couple of weeks, soon, would you still continue doing the work that you do today? And that could be like your job and comedy, or would you just can all that and be like, I just want to spend time with people? Like, how would you go about your time if you knew the world was ending in a few weeks?
So I've actually thought about this one. I know, like you sent me the questions beforehand, and I was kind of, this was not the one I was hoping we were going to skip. And it was the but no, it was so if the world was going to end, I mean, like I said earlier, the philosophy that I was brought up with is that, you know, you never know when your time's going to come up, so you just kind of live life. I would kind of treat it the not necessarily the same way. I mean, obviously there would be some differences, because I'm also a realist. If you know the world's going to end in a month, a lot of things are going to change real quick. So you could probably knock out some bucket list items that you didn't know were bucket list items real quick too.
Dude, I like real quick, I'll let you finish. But if I knew the world was ending in 3 weeks, I'm going to eat whatever the fuck I want. Like, I'm really into fitness and stuff, and like looking my best and like trying to look my best on stage. But if I know I'm going out in 3 fucking weeks and my legacy isn't going to matter because we're all going to be dead, I'm going to eat every fucking piece of fried chicken and ice cream and brownie that I fucking want till I blow up. Like, that's going to be me. I don't know if I'll quit music and stuff. I might still do that like for a few weeks. I'm obviously not going to like plan to write a new album. That's not going to exist, but I might like I might just like play the things that I know and enjoy them. But I'd probably work less and devote more time with people. I could probably say that, but I wouldn't completely stop like doing music and stuff like that.
Yeah, because you're still going to have the people that are, first of all, you're always going to have the people that won't believe it's really happening. They're like, no, it's a government conspiracy. This isn't happening. Like, yes, it is. We can see the meteor from here. Yeah. So like, that's not something in the sky that was made up. So yeah, like, but I think, you know, same thing. You spend time with friends. Make sure you spend time with the people that you really want to be around. That's going to help you out. But yeah, I'd probably still do comedy, just on a lower scale. I think if the world's ending, you're not going to get people into a club.
Yeah, no, and like, it makes sense. do a comedy show one more time before the world ends, because it's like that's being with people, that's helping people. Like, imagine what those jokes would be. Like, hey, the world's ending in a few weeks.
All right, so we got this clock behind us, and pay no attention to that. But if you'll look over here.
Okay, so then the last question is the one I'm assuming, Skip, but I want to break your brain today. I want to ask you, because you have more life experience, you have more time in the field of dating than me. Take a drink of water or whiskey or whatever you need to answer this question.
Go ahead. I've been thinking about it since you sent me the list. So.
And this is philosophical, so there's no right or wrong. And by the way, listeners, if I want you to answer, if you have a definition as well, how at this point of your life, how do you personally define the word love? What does love mean to you?
So this one, I was actually glad that you asked it, because it's just something I've never really thought about.
So I'm going to change your whole life now. No, just kidding.
Obviously, the first thing I did was went and looked up like the Webster's or definition. I was like, okay, well, what do they say? And then you have the scientific definition of love, which is basically it's a chemical reaction in your brain. Things like that. I think if I was to put love into my own words, I would probably say it's a emotional connection to a person, or a person or thing. I say thing because you have pets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, anybody that you're willing to go above and beyond for, and not necessarily, it's not something that you have to. I had the words. I really should. It's another one of those instances you need to write shit down when you have it in your head. I think it's definitely an emotion where you have decided that somebody else means more to you than anything else. That's a kind of a basic idea, but it's one of those unfortunate aspects of my PTSD is I don't have emotional attachments anymore.
Oh, okay.
So it's completely it's weird. I have emotions, but I can get rid of people really easily in my life. But
I would still say that you, based on your definition, or based on just like my observations of you, I still think you're very much full of love. Like, not all love has to be romantic. Like, I'm attached to this one person. Like, love could be like you said, we talked about this in your last podcast episode, the last podcast episode I had with you. You said that your meaning of life was to help other people. I mean, that's love. I would define that as love, is like putting other people before you in a way, like going out of your way to help people without really expecting much in return. I think that's an act of love. And I think you can do, it doesn't necessarily have to be this like close romantic bond with a person for that to be considered love. Like, you can love your neighbor just as much as you can love your wife,
Yeah. And that was the other part. I'm glad you brought that up, is it doesn't have to be a romantic, love. Like, you can love your parents, your pets, your friends, whatever it may be. I think, me personally, I think love is used too much nowadays. People love pizza. They love, the Mets or whatever team. And I'm like, what are you really getting out of pizza? Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, pizza is awesome. Love it. I like it a lot. Despite what my doctor tells me, it goes back to having the education and not giving a shit. But same thing, people. I think we use words a little too lightly sometimes, and I'm not talking about in art and theater and comedy. I'm talking about in regular
everyday
life.
speech. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, this ice cream was amazing. Like, really, was it? Did it change your life? I don't know. But yeah.
I'm thinking like I'm probably one of those people who overuse the words like that. And I'm sure okay, let's ask this. if there was one food that you could say you love or is amazing because you literally can't put it down, what would that be for you? Like your food that, like, what's your go-to food like that you're like, once I get my hands on this, I'm not putting this shit down?
Oh, I like street tacos.
Street tacos.
Yeah.
For me, it's anything dairy, like ice cream or cheese. Like I can't, like cheese, I can't stock cheese in my house. Like, because if I do, like, there's no such thing to me. Like if I buy a block of cheese, I'm eating that whole fucking thing in one night. It's disgusting.
Yeah. But yeah, like that kind of clears up and I really did. I thought about this because I was like, I've never thought about trying to put that in words or anything. And obviously it's loosely it can change based on what's going on.
I will say this. I've learned this year, I don't know if I know how to define love exactly or put it in words, but I do, if we are talking romantically, I do know what I think a lot of people have wrong about romantic love. I think in the past, when I was younger, romantic love for me, what it used to be, was trying to like find this perfect person that checked off all these boxes. And I really finally realized this year that part of love is just accepting somebody's bullshit. Because like when I think about it, like when I kind of go back in history, I'm like, man, I left this person because of this problem. Then I left the next person because of this problem. Then I left the next person because of this problem. It's like, wait a second, there's one thing in common here. They all had problems. And that's not because I'm necessarily picking horrible people, because I had some great boyfriends. Like that was because everybody has problems. So a lot of like love is just accepting people's bullshit and caring about them still. Like, you know what I mean? Like really seeing a person for who they are, for their positive and their negative qualities. I mean, speaking of pets, we do that for our pets all the time. Like for example, I have this one cat that he bites wires, he breaks things. He's a very dumb, stupid cat. If he was a human being, I wouldn't date him. Like, let's just put it that way. But as a cat, I adore him. Why is that so easy for me to do for a cat, but it's harder to do for a human being? You know what I mean? And I actually think, like, as weird as it sounds, the way that you love your pets kind of should be the way you like model romantic love in a way. Because it's like we'll go out of our way for our pets, no matter how stupid and annoying and how much they bite things. But with people, we're like, oh, one flaw, like you're out the door. You know what I mean? And I think that's a mistake that people make. You know?
Yeah. The word I like to use is you find somebody that you can tolerate the negatives in their life around you. So, and not necessarily, and that, when I say tolerate, I don't mean like you let them abuse you and stuff like that, but I'm talking about, hey, you tolerate the fact that, they, cut their toenails sitting on the couch next to you while you're watching the game. And you're like, dude, will you stop that? Like, but it's something you can be like, all right, fine. I know this is their thing, but it's not.
No, I 100% agree with you. I was going to say the same thing. Of course, like there's certain things you shouldn't tolerate because it's a problem. You should not tolerate abuse, or there's certain things like if someone's struggling with addiction issues, some people might be able to like stay with that and some people might not. I think that's like a reasonable choice to make, like if you want to leave a situation like that. But like you said, like because of dating apps and because of how easy it is to meet new people, a lot of people, like they're saying, oh, that he cuts his toenails. He bites his nails and it drives me crazy. It's like those things. I think you're going to have to accept a handful of those things in another person.
Yeah. And stuff like that. And that's where it also comes a little bit with maturity too. So learning what are real, like, red flags and what are just things that you're like, this is irritating, but whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can figure, or, like I had a friend of mine, he broke up with his girlfriend because she doesn't wear matching socks. I'm like, who the fuck cares?
Well, that's crazy.
But it drove him crazy. Like she wouldn't match her socks, and like she would just reach in and grab two socks and go. And I was like, who cares, dude? I'm like, they're socks. So
yeah, no, either that person is way too picky, or there was something else about the relationship that he didn't like and he just didn't want to admit it, and he just like fixated on that, because that just seems like an absolutely ridiculous reason to break up with a person,
Yeah. But yeah, so stuff like that. But yeah, like the whole love thing, like, I think there's different types of love. Once again, when you start talking about your pets versus your romantic relationship versus family and friends, it can be, but essentially it's just an emotion where you care about them, sometimes even more than they care about you. So,
yeah, no, I could agree with that. Okay, so we're going to end the podcast here. Again, everybody, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit like. Leave a comment on anything we talked about. And again, if you didn't see this episode before, this is James Mack. He's a comedian from New York City. And I will leave his information below if you want to check out his Instagram page and see if he has any shows coming up and everything like that. And that's it. Pranzata Podcast, episode 79. I hope you guys had a good time. Have a good night. Bye.